In this video, I want to show you all promising underdogs, the best inexpensive favorites, and the best bets to consider for this weekend. I'll also provide my final probability for each fighter's victory, along with their stat differentials. If you find this informative, helpful, or entertaining, please like and subscribe. It really helps keep me motivated to create these videos for you all. I've also added my Patreon information in the description if you want to support me there. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier. The premium tier gives you early access to all of the analysis and results from my videos, along with the additional data analysis and stats. This includes my prediction model results, fighter history, stat overviews, promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, prop bets to consider, and deep dives into each fighter's record and historical fights. So you'll get to see their strengths, their weaknesses, their consistency across different stats, and their stat comparisons versus all of their historical opponents' averages. All of this combined will help you with your picks and bets. There's a $20 a month tier, which is around $5 per event, and you can also purchase each of these separately, but the membership is cheaper and easier. Plus, you're directly helping with the improvement and expansion of the content for this channel. Running this data, analysis, and prediction models takes hours every day and week, so I'd greatly appreciate any support that you can show. And thank you to everyone who has shown me support recently. Also, if you like detailed breakdowns and predictions, I do those weekly for full cards as well, including prelim fights, so feel free to check those out on my channel. Let's go ahead and jump right in. First, let's take a look at promising underdogs. The fighters' names are on the leftmost column, followed by their probability of victory that I presented in the prediction video from earlier this week. These probabilities are not only based on several data science prediction models that are trained for accuracy, but also on qualitative information such as the fighter's momentum, their recent performances, their career's trajectory, psychological factors, their training camps, their weight cuts, and any other available information out there. I've also provided the stat advantages for each fighter compared to their opponent, excluding differentials where one of the fighters has a 0 in their stats in order to avoid misleading information. Alright, I've kept you guys waiting long enough, let's go ahead and get started. So the first promising underdog that I want to highlight for you all is Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett is 8 years younger than Bobby Green. He has a reach advantage of 2 inches, he absorbs 0.05 less strikes per minute, and he lands 1.3 more submissions on average. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Paddy Pimblett a 54.1% probability of victory, so I do think that he's an underdog who will get the victory. He is a pick of mine for UFC 304. I think he's a good underdog to feature in this video because he's won 21 fights, he's finished 72% of them, he's won all 5 of his UFC fights, although I do acknowledge that some of them were easy, and recently, of course, he's won all 5 of his last 5 fights. He's actually on a 7-fight win streak. The last time he lost was actually September of 2018. And not only does Paddy have things going for him on paper and statistically, but he has some good things going for him as a fighter and stylistically as well. I do like his fighting style and his versatility. I like how he uses his boxing, his Muay Thai, and his kickboxing together, which allows him to apply constant pressure to his opponents and apply a huge volume of strikes. Not only that, but he is better on the ground game than Bobby Green is. He has a BJJ black belt and he has a pretty good amount of submissions in his back pocket that he can use and implement in this fight if it goes to the ground. Paddy Pimblett also has some strategic advantages going into this fight, such as what I believe include his striking pressure. I think that he lands a high volume which will likely overwhelm Green, who as a fighter really relies more on his technical boxing skills, although he is very comfortable with his striking. Also, Paddy Pimblett is good with the takedowns and his submissions. He's able to take the fight to the ground when he needs to. Maybe he's going to try to find that submission opportunity, knowing that Bobby Green's not the best at them. And although the previous fight had me kind of questioning this, but he does have good cardio and stamina overall as a fighter. He is youthful, and I think that that's a huge thing going for him in this fight. So just to recap, Paddy Pimblett has versatile striking, he has a good ground game, he's youthful, he has a home crowd support, and he has kind of an unpredictable fighting style, which I think gives him multiple pathways to beat Bobby Green coming into this fight. I think that odd makers are kind of buying the hype of Bobby Green, which I don't blame them, we all love Bobby Green, right? But I think that they're underestimating Paddy Pimblett's skills. That's really going to be put to the test, and we'll see if Paddy Pimblett can come out on top. Because you could beat a fighter like Tony Ferguson, sure, but can you beat a fighter like Bobby Green, and then can you move up in the division and continue to beat those guys that are at the top? So the next promising underdog that I want to highlight in this video is Manel Kape. Manel Kape lands 3.59 more strikes per minute than his opponent. He has a 7% higher striking accuracy and a 2% higher defense. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Manel Kape a 45.8% probability of victory, so it's important to keep in mind that I'm still leaning towards Muhammad Mokaev to win, but Manel Kape is very close to being able to pull off a victory here in terms of probability, not just statistically, but remember that probability takes into mind all sorts of research outside of stats as well as watching previous fight footage. So I think Manel Kape is a good underdog to feature in this video. He's won 19 fights. He's finished about 85% of them. He's won 4 of his 6 UFC fights, recently winning 4 out of his last 5, and he is on a 4-fight win streak. The last time he lost was March of 2021. But let's talk about reasons aside from stats alone as to why Manel Kape can pull off the upset here. I think that his extensive experience against some of those high-level opponents, combined with his powerful striking and that knockout ability that he has, might give him an edge over the less experienced Muhammad Mokaev, especially if he gets caught. Kape's aggressive style and his takedown defense could neutralize Mokaev's grappling advantage, while his championship experience provides him the confidence and the mental toughness that's needed in high-pressure situations such as UFC 304. However, Kape does have to be very careful of Mokaev's wrestling skills, and he has to avoid being taken down and controlled for extensive periods. Again, I do think that Mokaev's going to win, but in terms of value, Manel Kape definitely has value. We are going to talk about bets towards the end of this video, so stay tuned for that. But the second fighter, underdog to feature in this video, is Manel Kape. Now, the next promising underdog that I want to highlight for you all is Oban Elliott. Oban Elliott has a height advantage of an inch. He's 3 years younger. He has a reach advantage of an inch. He lands 0.44 more strikes per minute. He absorbs 1.01 less strikes per minute. He has a 10% higher striking defense, and he has a 7% higher takedown accuracy. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Oban Elliott a 58.1% probability of victory, and that's pretty big for an underdog, so I definitely do think that he's going to win. He is a pick of mine for UFC 304, and I am fairly confident in his ability to pull off this upset. He's won 10 fights, he's finished half of them, he's won his 1 UFC fight, recently winning 5 of his last 5 fights, and he's coming off of a 6-fight win streak. In fact, the last time he lost was back in December of 2021. Oban Elliott holds several advantages over Preston Parsons that extend beyond mere statistics alone. Elliott's versatility in both striking and grappling is a significant factor in this fight, enabling him to seamlessly switch stances and adapt his fighting style, which makes him an unpredictable and challenging opponent for Parsons. Not only that, but you can clearly tell that Oban Elliott is motivated and he is confident as well as a fighter, which I think will bleed into how he fights. Now, in contrast, Parsons has shown inconsistencies as a fighter recently, particularly in his striking defense, which Elliott's well-rounded skill is very likely to exploit in this fight. Now, you do have to keep in mind Parsons does have that submission game that is going to be a notable threat throughout this fight, and it has to be respected. But I think that Elliott's improved takedown defense and his overall adaptability as a fighter does show that he could neutralize this aspect of Parsons' strategy, which is why I think he's going to be able to win, and I think that that's why the odd makers got this one completely wrong. I also think that Elliott's going to be able to maintain control of this fight and dictate the pace, which should also contribute to him getting the victory over Preston Parsons. Now, the next promising underdog that I want to highlight for you all is Gregory Rodriguez. Gregory Rodriguez has a height advantage of an inch. He lands 0.12 more strikes per minute. He has a 1% higher striking defense. He lands 2.01 more takedowns on average. He has a 31% higher takedown accuracy, and he has a 50% higher takedown defense. Now, all things considered, I gave Gregory Rodriguez a 47.8% probability of victory, so it's no surprise that he's being featured on this part of this video. I think that that's very close to him being 50-50, and he could definitely pull off the upset at UFC 304. Gregory Rodriguez has won 15 fights. He's finished 87% of them. He's won 6 of his 8 UFC fights, and he's recently won 4 out of his last 5. He's also on a 2-fight win streak coming into this fight. The last time he lost was in January of 2023. But let's talk about reasons aside from stats alone as to why Gregory Rodriguez can pull off the upset. There's a few reasons as to why Gregory Rodriguez has the upper hand over a fighter like Christian Leroy Duncan, and that's due to his extensive experience and his overall well-rounded skill set. Rodriguez has a high knockout power and versatility in both striking and grappling, which makes him a very challenging opponent. However, his tendency to be kind of reckless and have a high strike absorption rate are vulnerabilities that Duncan could likely exploit, because you do have to keep in mind Duncan is fighting in his home country and he does have a strong striking game and a lower strike absorption rate, but his relative inexperience against some of those top tier opponents will be a disadvantage coming into a fight against a more experienced fighter like Rodriguez. Ultimately, I think that Rodriguez's experience and his finishing ability do give him a slight edge in this matchup, not enough for me to confidently say that he will win, but enough for me to say that this fight is more 50-50 than you think, and that there is value in a fighter like Gregory Rodriguez if you are kind of leaning towards him. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gregory Rodriguez goes in super aggressive and ends up getting a KO/TKO. That's not how I'm predicting this fight to go, But again, the whole point of this series of this video is to highlight value for you all. Ultimately, not everything that is statistical is correct in MMA. Sometimes you do have to look at those advantages of the underdogs and see who is actually able to pull off an upset and how likely are they able to pull off an upset. That's why I love giving a probability for fighters that are not only based on statistics, but based on research and fight film study observations as well. So the next promising underdog that I want to highlight for you all is Marcin Prachnio. So Prachnio lands 2.33 more strikes per minute. He has a 14% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 0.57 less strikes per minute, and he has a 4% higher striking defense. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Prachnio a 47.4% probability of victory. So he's another underdog that's very close to being 50-50. And I think he's a good fighter to feature in this part of the video because he's won 17 fights. He's finished about 71% of them. He's won 4 out of his 9 UFC fights, which even though that's not a high winning rate, that still gives him really good UFC experience. Recently, he's done decent. He's won 3 out of his last 5 fights, and he is coming off of a win into this fight. The last time he lost was actually July of 2023. But let's talk about reasons aside from stats alone as to why Prachnio can pull off the upset here. And if you watch Prachnio's previous fights, you can clearly see that he does have striking power that needs to be noted, especially over a fighter like Modestas Bukauskas. I think that because of his extensive karate background and his experience in multiple major organizations, he does have some striking upper hand or advantages compared to Bukauskas. Now, while Bukauskas does have that reach advantage and he has great kickboxing skills, I think that his defensive gaps and his inconsistencies might be exploited by Prachnio in this fight. That's why I'm giving this fight 50-50. Now, Prachnio's ability to capitalize on some of those weaknesses that Bukauskas has, particularly his susceptibility to those leg kicks and some of those knockout strikes, positions him as an underdog who can likely pull off an upset compared to his opponent. So I think that there is value in a fighter like Prachnio, even though he's early on in the card. Alright, now we're going to switch gears, and now I'm going to talk about the promising favorites for this card, which I've chosen through 3 main criteria. First, they have a high statistical weighted confidence either through my prediction models or through fighter stat evaluation or some combination of both. Second, their opponent does not have a high probability of victory, so you're not going to notice any overlap between the underdogs I just showed you earlier and these fighters. And the third thing is that their odds aren't too expensive. If a fighter has like -600 or -700 odds, they're obviously just too expensive to pick, but you could always parlay them if you want. In this video, I'm going to focus more on finding you guys some value rather than just stating some obvious picks and pointing out those -600 type fighters. So I consider these 3 things for you guys. I do all the work for you guys, and then I show you the valuable picks that fit that criteria. And if you want to know how I predict each fight plays out and the results, please check out my prediction breakdown from earlier this week where I review stats, each fighter's fight history, the results of my 7 data science prediction models, my final picks, and the method of victory. Now for this portion of the video, for these favorites, I'm only going to review their stat differentials that they have against their opponent. But again, if you want those in-depth breakdowns, please refer to that video from earlier this week. It will help you out. So the first inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards has a height advantage of 3 inches. He's 4 years younger than Belal Muhammad. He has a reach advantage of 2 inches. He has a 10% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 1.3 less strikes per minute, and he lands 0.2 more submissions on average. All things considered, I'm giving Leon Edwards a 60% probability of victory, and I think he's more likely to beat Belal Muhammad unless Belal's able to utilize his grappling and his submission skills to take the fight to the ground and just get more control time overall and eke out a victory over Leon Edwards. You have to keep in mind Leon Edwards does have really good striking accuracy that has improved over time, especially with each fight that he goes through, and also he's grown his confidence a lot. I know that he's been kind of cringy leading up to this fight in particular, but besides that, there is a skill gap between the 2 fighters' striking skills, and I think that Leon Edwards' striking is so precise and accurate and powerful that he's going to be able to control Belal. I don't think he's going to knock him out necessarily, but I think that he should be able to control Belal enough for him to get the victory. And I think that Leon does have some good takedown defense, which should neutralize some of Belal's grappling efforts. Now the next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is Molly McCann. Molly McCann lands 2.85 more strikes per minute. She has a 12% higher striking defense, and she lands 0.23 more takedowns on average. All things considered, I'm giving Molly McCann a 73% probability of victory, and I think she's a good favorite to feature. Now I know that not everyone is a fan of Molly McCann, but I think that in this particular matchup, she should have an easy path to victory. Now, the next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is Kaolin Loughran. Kaolin lands 2.91 strikes per minute. He has a 5% higher striking accuracy. He lands 2.26 more takedowns on average, and he has a 27% higher takedown accuracy. All things considered, I'm giving Kaolin a 63.5% probability of victory. This guy is youthful, he's energetic, and his fights are very entertaining and interesting to watch. I think he has good potential as well, and he should be able to get the victory this weekend and continue his journey as a professional fighter. Now, the next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is Mick Parkin. Parkin is 4 years younger than his opponent. He has a reach advantage of 1 inch. He has a 2% higher striking accuracy, a 3% higher striking defense. He lands 1.12 more takedowns on average, and he has a 14% higher takedown defense. Now, all things considered, I gave Mick Parkin a 67.1% probability of victory. Now, the final inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all before we dive into the bets and prop bets that I want to show is none other than Shauna Bannon. Bannon has a height advantage of 2 inches. She's 2 years younger, and she has a reach advantage of 4 inches. So she has the physical advantage. And I also think that she has good training, good support, and all of that will make her well equipped to pull off a victory this weekend. All things considered, I'm giving her a 65.7% probability of victory in this fight, and I think she's another good favorite. She should be able to get it done. Now let's review the bets that I think have value for this card and have a good statistical and stylistic possibility of happening. Please disregard prop bets where you're picking the other fighter to win. I'll start from the top of the card and work my way down. You'll see that I've laid out a few options for you guys depending on how risk averse you are and how much risk you're willing to take. So, for example, for Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad 2, I honestly think that that fight is going to go to the judges based on both fighters' stylistic approaches to fights. So you could take anywhere from the over 1.5 all the way to the fight going the distance. Now, for the Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes co-main event, I think that you could take Aspinall via KO/TKO if you're going for him, or you could take Blaydes via KO/TKO if you're actually going for him. I don't think that that fight's going the distance, so you could also take the fight not going the distance. You could take the under 2.5 or the under 1.5 if you really want to roll the dice. I didn't really like any of the prop bets for Green versus Pimblett or Mackay versus Cape, so I skipped over those two. I don't want to recommend anything to you guys that I'm not very confident in. So then going down to Arnold Allen versus Giga Chikadze, I would consider Allen via decision if you are going for him. Or you could also consider taking the over 1.5, over 2.5, or actually the fight going the distance. I do think that that fight is going to go the distance. I don't see either of them getting the finish, but I do see them going all 3 rounds and someone taking the control there. Now, for Nathaniel Wood versus Daniel Pineda, I would take Wood via decision if you are leaning towards Wood. You could also take over 1.5, over 2.5, or the fight going the distance, depending on how much risk you're willing to take. Moving down the card, we have Molly McCann versus Bruno Brazil. I would take McCann via KO/TKO. I don't think that there's any other prop bets that are worth it for that fight. Then we have Kaolin Loughran versus Jake Hadley. For that, I would take anywhere between going over 1.5 all the way to the fight going the distance, depending on how much risk you want to take. And that's actually the same story for Mick Parkin versus Lucas Bresky or Oban Elliott versus Preston Parsons. Then we have Christian Leroy Duncan versus Gregory Rodriguez. If you are leaning towards Rodriguez and getting that value bet, I would take Rodriguez via KO/TKO. If you're going towards Duncan, I would also take Duncan via KO/TKO if you're rooting for him. Regardless, I don't think that this fight is going the distance, so if you have a neutral stance between the two, you could take the fight not going the distance or any of the unders if you want a little bit better reward. Now for the third fight of the night, that is Sam Patterson versus Kiefer Crosby. For that fight, you could take Patterson via submission if you're rooting for him, or you could take Crosby via KO/TKO. I think he has better chances of getting the knockout if you're rooting towards Crosby. Regardless, I don't honestly think that this fight is going the distance. I think either of the fighters will get a finish, so you could take that or any of the unders. And the story is the same for the first 2 fights of the night, Shannon Bannon versus Alice Ardelion or Modestas Bukauskas versus Marcin Prachnio. I think both fights are likely going to go the distance, so you could take any of the overs or just the fight going the distance if you'd like to do that, which should set you up for some success because you have a neutral stance and both fights are likely stylistically and statistically to go the distance instead of someone getting the finish in those two. Please keep in mind these are only prop bets. If you want to take moneyline fights and try to figure out who's more likely to win based on just moneyline, maybe you're not a big fan of prop bets, please look at my previous upload from earlier this week where I go over predictions and probabilities of victory. Those probabilities are, again, not only based on stats alone and data science, machine learning, statistical models, but they're also based on research, fight film studying observations, and all of the external factors that make a pick well-rounded. You got to consider the qualitative factors, you got to consider the quantitative factors, and combine them. That's what makes a good pick a good pick. That's why I'm averaging 66 to 70% accuracy, even on early prelim fights and prelim fights. You guys know I like to do the research, I put in the work, and I share everything with you guys. And with that said, that wraps up this video. I really appreciate you all for watching and being so supportive as always. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and check out that Patreon if you want to support me through there as well. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier, which includes early results, picks, and bets, and also includes premium data, analysis, and stats as well. Your support helps keep me encouraged and motivated to continue running all of this data and analysis for you guys and providing you guys all these insights. So thank you once again, and as always, see you guys in the next one.